Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Sunday to us all. We are welcome to the day fifth of our Writers Summit. Though meant to be day six, but because we have a rescheduled session, it stands at day fifth. Today, we'll be looking at storytelling that sells, which will be facilitated by Mata Ike. Mata Ike holds a Bachelor's of Art degree in English from the renowned University of Jos. She has taken and is currently taking relevant online courses to add to her wealth of knowledge in the area of writing, publishing, tutoring, editing, and mentoring. She has over 8 years experience working in the educational sector and has worked in various capacities in same ranging from classroom teacher, online tutor, to home lesson tutor. She has taught not just kids but also adult learners in the political, religious, and academic arena. She is a tutor, a storyteller, a literary critic, and an unpublished author. She's currently working as head tutor with Well-Read Education Service, Abuja, Nigeria. Occasionally, she proofreads and edits literary work for select clients. So, in a moment, I'm going to be handing over the mic to our facilitator of the day. But before then, I would like to remind each and every one of us to always grant permission to StreamYard for proper communication. So we'll be seeing your name in the comment section when you make your comment. And would like to remind all participants that registration is still ongoing, so encourage your friends to join this Writers Summit so that they too will partake from the knowledge you're gaining. All participants and affiliates are also reminded that for every referral you make to the summit, you get a percentage. Punctuality is the key. Let us always be punctual for our classes. Let's sit back and enjoy another exciting session of our Writers Summit. Over to you, Martha.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Can you turn up your camera? We can't see you.
Okay. My camera is on, I think. Okay. Can you see me now?
Nope, not yet. Yes, we can see you now. You're welcome, Martha.
Okay. Thank you, Maureen.
You're now in charge.
Nice seeing you again. Okay. Thank you. All right.
Nice
Good evening,
meeting you.
everyone. Classmates. I think I'm also learning from you guys today. Okay. You're welcome to today's class. And like Maureen said, my name is Martha, and I'm a teacher and an unpublished writer. I tell stories mostly. So you're welcome to today's class as we begin. Anu. Okay. So please, when I ask a question and those who can answer can just give me the answers on the chat box so that I can get the answers. Okay. So to begin, I would like to ask a question. What do you think story writing is to you? Today's topic is talking about storytelling that sells. But before we go into all of that, I would like to know, what is storytelling to you? It means different things for everybody, but eventually we'll all arrive at a particular answer that still means something related to what everybody has in his or her mind. So I'd like to know, those listening, those in the classroom, please, what does storytelling mean to you? I'll just give us 1 minute to type in our answers if we have something to say about that. 1 minute. Storytelling, what it means to you. I'm waiting. 1 minute. Let's see what we have as an idea as regards storytelling. Nobody? Wow. Okay. I'm still hopeful that before the 1 minute elapses, somebody else probably will make me proud. Okay. 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 All right. 1 minute is done. I don't think anybody gave me an answer. If there's any other place where I need to say the answers, I'm not seeing them, but I'll shoot. Okay. So for storytelling, I think, okay, somebody is answering. Using stories to talk about experiences, real or imagined. Thank you, Father John. Thank you. It's about histories and information giving. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you very much. Any other answer? Okay. Storytelling means different things for every other person. For those who have contributed, thank you very much. Okay, so storytelling means different things for different people. And since I'm a storyteller, maybe I should start with telling a story myself. Okay, so I came to discover the power of storytelling, I think, when I got into JSS1 many years back. I was a very shy person, and I discovered that telling stories by way of writing, not communicating with other people, was an outlet for me. So I would always write down maybe my day, how my day went, or experiences I had had in the past. So I found an outlet through storytelling. Now, for different people, it means different things. And storytelling is not just a specific thing that is boxed. And so you say this is the general overview of what a story is or what storytelling is all about. Storytelling can be found in sales, even in the medical field, in engineering, in every walk of life, basically. You can find storytelling. Now, for those who are into business, if you tell a lot of stories, there is a guarantee that you would eventually make more sales than those who don't even tell stories. Case study. Yesterday, I went to get a perfume from the markets, and I was confused as to what to get and what not to get. And eventually, I was able to pick one, not because it was my initial choice, but because the person selling the perfume was able to convince me, okay, gave me a story. It didn't just say, okay, buy this is cheaper over the other one, or this is better than the other one. There was a story attached to the sales pitch he was making for me to be able to buy that particular perfume. So that's the power of storytelling. You can use storytelling to persuade people to do what they didn't even intend to do positively, by the way. Okay, so I was hooked by that story. And that's the essence of telling stories. You don't just tell stories and then move on. You have to be able to hook your audience. Okay, so I was able to buy that particular perfume because the story the salesperson told me hooked me, and I couldn't pick any other perfume except that particular one. And there goes storytelling. So the power of storytelling and discovering that there is power in storytelling. People look at storytelling and sometimes they're like, this is more of a boring thing to do, or this is a tedious thing to do. But you find that in every walk of life, you get to tell stories. Okay. And man, as a human person or as a being, is more like an addict to storytelling. Okay, you go through your day thinking thoughts that are all about stories. You lie down to sleep and you're also still thinking about stories. And then when you sleep, eventually, you dream stories. And then when you wake up, you are forced probably to share that story of the dream with somebody else. So you see, our life totally revolves around storytelling. I hope everybody is following me. Okay, so storytelling is more of our lifestyle. We live stories, we dream stories, everything we do from beginning to the end of the day is a story. Okay, so storytelling is key to human activity. Okay, you can't do without storytelling. And this is one area that a lot of people haven't even tapped into. We have the likes of Chimamanda, we had the likes of Achibi, God bless his soul, and many others. But a lot of youths who want to go into storytelling may not actually know how to go about it, how to start. And those who have even started may be discouraged, maybe as a result of the publishing difficulties or meeting one challenge or the other, and probably having writer's block. But if you are able to tap into the money aspect of storytelling, telling a story that sells, you tell a good story and then you are able to sell it, just like Chimamanda is going places in this world now, right now, with storytelling. You'll be able to make money out of it and also enjoy what you are doing. Now, where are the places where you can find story? Maybe I'm saying things that you're not very conversant with, but when I give you examples, you begin to see that storytelling you can find everywhere. So news stories, you find that there. Pastors preaching or priests preaching on the altar, they still preach, and then they use stories to relate their points. You listen to podcasts, those are stories. Musicians also still tell stories via their music. So music is part of storytelling, and storytelling is part of our life. So you can't do without it. You find it virtually or literally in every walk of life. You want to do business, you want to do engineering. Basically, you have to tell stories to be able to convince your listeners why they should do what you want them to do or why they should purchase from you. Okay, that covers it. Now, what is a story? What is a story? And before you say, "Oh, I'm a poet," I'm not a storyteller. Every human being has a story. As long as you're alive, you wake up in the morning, you go to bed at night, you go to work in the daytime, you are a storyteller. Until the day you die, until the day I die, we remain storytellers. So we tell stories every day without even knowing it. And if you wonder, okay, I want to write a story, what do I write? The cabbie that refused to behave himself while he was taking you home is a story. I write stories from literally everything that happens around me. Okay. I remember writing a story last month about a cabbie who misbehaved on the way. And I got a lot of likes on that particular story on Facebook. So I have platforms where I write, by the way. And you don't have to start big like Chimamanda. You can start small. You write short stories, pieces for the day, maybe your experience for the day, and then you post on your platforms. That's an encouraging way for you to start writing stories if you're still having challenges. You can't just start writing a whole novel. You can start from novelettes, you can start from small pamphlets, you can even start from writing just your day. It's a story. Okay. Now that takes us back to what is story? What is storytelling? What is storytelling? So storytelling is a way of communicating. This is a personal definition for me, and it still has to do with what everybody who typed the answers on the screen for me were able to give me. So storytelling is a way of communicating man's daily struggles and the resolution or otherwise of these struggles. So you go out there, you hustle, you come back in the day and you were successful. That's a story. You go out there, you hustle, you come back, you weren't successful. That's still what a story. So basically, for me, storytelling is a way of communicating your struggles, man's daily struggles every single day, and also recording them for the benefit of history and how those struggles were either resolved or otherwise. It's so life. So sometimes you may not be able to resolve some of the things that occur in your life. So Basically, that can happen. Okay, so that's story. And then Ezra Pound, a literature person in the past. I don't want to go into details of Ezra Pound. He was the person that said that literature cannot be told in a vacuum. There's no vacuum. There is no empty space for literature. There's no empty space for storytelling. There's always going to be a story for you to tell. And so Ezra Pound made that submission because every day in man's life is a story. And so what it means is that you cannot say that there is a vacuum, meaning that there is a deep hole where nothing exists. There's always going to be something in that hole for you to make a story out of. Okay. And our purpose, according to Ezra Pound, for telling stories, for literature, is for you to carry out a social function. And that brings us to the purpose of your storytelling. What do you intend to achieve with your storytelling? What do you intend to achieve? Do you want to educate people? Do you want to inform people? Do you want to make people laugh? Do you want to expose life to people? So there are different purposes for why people write, whether it's poetry, storytelling, or what have you. But because we are focusing on storytelling today, so I would say that the purpose of storytelling varies. It could be for information purposes, it could be for learning purposes, it could be for entertainment purposes, it could be for just laughter or just to record history. Those are what the purposes of what literature. Please, if you're all hearing me, I think I'm rambling on. I need to be able to understand that people are following me. Okay, so if you're following me, please can I get a wave or something, an emoji, so that I understand that everybody is coming up with me. Are we all together? Are we all together? I need to get answers so that I understand that people are following what I'm saying. Are we following? Is everybody keen into what I'm saying or what I've said thus far? Okay. Thank you, Francisca Amayo. Thank you. Other people, please. She's not the only person in the class. I would like to get other reviews. I'm following. Okay, thank you. Who else is following?
I am following as well.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. All right. So, still on the purpose of storytelling, your story could be tragic. Your story could be tragic comedy. Your story could also be comedy. What I mean by this is not every story or every storytelling should end on a happy note. Life generally does not always end happily for people. People die, people give birth to children, people celebrate weddings, but people still have losses. So your storytelling does not necessarily have to start happily or start tragically and then end happily. Life happens. Sometimes you start happily and then it ends tragically. So if you're going to write a tragic story, how would it end? It would end with maybe somebody dying or one of your favorite characters in the play not in the story not living up to the expectations. Okay. So what it basically means is if you want to tell a tragic story, yeah, you're not telling it because you are a horrible person. You're not telling a tragic story because you're not a happy person. You're telling a tragic story probably because you want to teach people that life is not always rosy. Okay. So your storytelling could be a tragic one that or a happy one that ends tragically. And then it could also be a happy one, a comedy, where things happen, tragedies happen, but eventually things end well. Okay, that's also storytelling. And then your storytelling could also be just thank you, Facebook user. I can't see the name. Okay, so it could also be just about exposition, exposing how life is. Okay. So that does it for the purpose of storytelling, writing a story that sells. You can't just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to write a story. And then you write it, and then people read it and they don't understand it. Your story has to be able to what? hook people. And what do I mean by it hooking people? When your story hooks people, they are able to keep reading. They're able to get meaning out of it. They are able to relate to it. So people shouldn't read your story and they are dissatisfied with your story. People shouldn't read your story and they are not wowed by your story. Okay. So I've heard people say, okay, I wrote this book. They don't understand what I wrote. Anyway, I wrote it for me. No, you don't write stories for yourself. You might as well have just locked it up in a box underneath your bed. But for the purpose of people reading that story, you have an audience. The audience is meant to read your story. You're expected to do what? To write stories that resonate with your audience. Okay? So when you write a story, for instance, about life, society, let's say the Nigerian situation, you're writing a story about the Nigerian situation, people should be able to do what? Relate. Don't just wake up one day and write a story, put it out there for people to buy, and then they buy it, they don't understand it, they don't relate with it. And yet, this is something that is happening around them, they are supposed to relate to, and they are not able to do what? Relate to it. What it means is that you have failed as a writer. That book may not sell. And why wouldn't it sell? Because you've written something that does not resonate with your audience. Your audience should be able to relate, to see themselves in certain characters in your work. They should be able to empathize with certain characters in your work. Okay. So don't just write for the purpose of writing. Write to make meaning. Write to make impact. Write for the purpose of communicating your message to your audience. Okay. So when you write and your audience get the message, maybe you want to pass the message of love, the message of how life can be transient, and so on and so forth. Your audience should get that message. It should resonate with them. Okay. Nobody writes and then dumps it in a box. You should write and then put it out there for people to read and to be able to do what? Appreciate themselves in your work, see themselves in your work. Okay. That's the purpose of writing. So if you're intending to write a book that is going to sell, like Chimamanda Adichie's work, like Achebe's work. Achebe's work still lives on even after he's gone. If you want to be able to write stories like that, you need to be able to, first of all, ask yourself, what message do I want to pass to people through my work? Do I want to pass a message of love? Is my theme going to be about death? And if it's going to be about death, what is the purpose of passing across a message of death through your work to people? You want them to learn a lesson in working towards the afterlife and all of that. So there should be a purpose, first of all, to your writing. Okay, I hope everybody is coming along with me. Okay, so like I said, everyone has a story. Everyone has a story. Even when you don't have stories, people around you have stories. Chimamanda Adichie was able to write stories from her grandfather's stories. She has attested to that more than twice on several occasions of getting stories from her grandfather. So everybody has a story. Every day is a story. So if you're having challenges writing, first of all, calm down and ask yourself, what do I want to write? Sit down and think about your day and start from there. Okay. So you have a story. The next person beside you has a story. Your siblings have stories to tell you, and you can make stories out of that. Now, in terms of plagiarism, when I was talking about siblings having stories, parents having stories, they've not written down these stories. They don't even value it the way you may value because you are a born storyteller or you are an aspiring storyteller. Okay, somebody can tell you a story and then you weave your own story around that particular story and arrive at a book that would sell. Okay, so everyone has a story. Do not discourage yourself with, oh, I don't have a story. Oh, I think I'm good with poetry. Oh, I think I'm good with drama. You have a story. The next person has a story. And whatever story that is out there can be told. Just weave your words around them and you have your book out there to sell. All right. So the next thing I'm going to be talking about is where can we use stories? If you feel, okay, what if I write this story? I write this story, who's going to patronize it? Or what do I need these stories for? If you think that way, then here it comes. Like I said at the beginning of the class, you have stories all over. You have stories all over. And so if you're in doubt as to when to use or who can use your story, people need stories every day. If you go on websites, sometimes you see stories there. Sales pitch, for instance, you see stories there. Then again, political people use stories. You don't just go out there and convince people to vote for you and all. You can be a speech writer for a political person and then end up weaving around that political speech with stories. People are attracted to stories. People get bored when there are no stories. You can't just keep on droning on and on and on without relating it with an example that the audience may have already been aware of. Okay. So your audience can be captivated, can be captured with what story. I'm a teacher. So sometimes when I'm talking to my kids in the classroom and they seem bored or they seem distracted, I can hook them with stories. Then again, parents can come in and say, okay, we want to register our kids here and would like to know what your progress report on other kids you've handled before is. You have to tell stories. You can't just say, oh, we have track record, we do this, we do that. No parent wants to hear that. They want to hear examples. They want to see real life situations of stories and people who have passed through the same phase their kids are supposed to pass through if they eventually register with you. And so you have to tell stories. So, for instance, let me give you a scenario. A parent comes in and says, okay, what can you offer my kids? My kids are having challenges with learning, and that's why we want to pull them out of the other school. And then he asks you, what exactly would you do differently? Have you had instances of people having this problem my kids have? And then you go this way. Yes, we do. We have 35% of our kids doing well, and so on. You begin to call out data. A parent is not able to process that immediately. But when you begin to tell stories like, oh, we had a particular gene from last session who had the same issue, was put out of school, and we were able to find out her particular issue. The teachers focused on her. And just last month, she was probably the top of the class or third burst in the class. And so when you go with all these stories, the parents begin to see their kids in these children or in this person you've just told them a story about. Okay, so storytelling is a way of life. If you feel you don't need it, then you must be mistaken. So as a teacher, as a lawyer, you need to tell stories. As a politician, you need to tell stories. People need stories. Content creators on social media also need stories. Sometimes you get bored reading certain pages, not because what they have there isn't really interesting, but because they have a lot of numbers, a lot of data, a lot of statistics, a lot of technical terms on those things they've written. And so you need to be able to do what? Tell stories to assuage the boredom of people so that people can relate to what you're trying to what pass across. So okay. So again, I would like to get your emojis to understand that you are following me. I talk a bit fast. So please, if I'm talking fast, you can let me know. If I need to slow down, I'll slow down. So please, if you're with me, give me an emoji so that I know that we are together. Okay. So as a classroom teacher, we always have to get feedback. So it's not easy having to teach people you're not seeing. So I need to be able to get feedback so that I'm sure we're not just droning on and on. All right. Please give me an emoji if you're with me. Thank you. Okay. Amayo Francisca, thank you. Facebook user, thank you. All right. Thank you very much to those who gave me their emojis. Thank you. God bless you. All right. So I was talking about places where we can use stories. So the clergy use stories, politicians use stories, sales pages need stories, business people need stories. And so we need you, people who are into these businesses and are not naturally storytellers may actually employ you to use their handles, to use their website to tell stories so that they can get a lot of other customers patronizing them. Pastors and clergymen generally and women have been known to use stories to tell their message, to pass across the message. I went to church today. I know the pastor, the Reverend Father, was able to use stories as well during his sermon. So stories are very important. They are key. They are our everyday reality. All right. Now, how do we tell a story well? How do we tell a good story? Hmm? How do we tell a good story? Can anybody tell me? How do we tell a good story? Can you tell me one thing we need to be able to tell a good story? So you can send in your answers. Where can we use stories? Where is it possible for us to use stories? Or better still, how can we tell good stories? Rather, I made a mistake. How can we tell good stories? One thing we need to do right in order to tell good stories. You can send in your ideas, please. How can we tell good stories? Stories that people will listen to or will read and be wowed by it. How can we tell good stories? Anybody? What do you think you need to do to be able to tell a good story? I'm waiting. Personal experiences. Thank you. Personal experiences. Thank you. Any other person? Okay, dokie. All right. So, personal experiences. Okay, so reflections. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I was actually talking about how to tell good stories, but I'm glad you guys gave me where we can get inspiration for good stories from. You gather the ideas based on what you want to write. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you. I appreciate. So you gather the ideas based on what you want to write. Fantastic. Okay. So the first two comments you gave me reflections and experiences. So those are like inspirations from where you can get stories. Okay. So where can you get sellable stories from? Let me address that. So you can get stories from your experiences. You can get stories from other people's experiences. You can get stories, inspiration from stories from your reflections. You can get stories, sellable stories from history, things that happened before and things that are happening now, and then you relate them together and you have what a story. So you can basically find stories everywhere. So let me say that again. You can find stories from basically anywhere. Your experiences, the experiences of your friends, the experiences of your family members, the experiences of your grandparents who are even late, the experiences of your community. You can get stories, inspiration from for stories from all of those places. So you don't have like a lacuna as to where to get a story from. Story is just everywhere. Is everywhere. The limitation could be, how do I start? We'll address that. How do I start? And if you're going to ask yourself, how do I start? Just do what starts. If you keep thinking about it, how do I start? You will eventually not do it. So while you're thinking about it, how do I start? Just start from somewhere. But then you have to make a plan as to how to start so that you don't fail in the process of doing what? Writing your story. So we now go over to elements of a good story. What are those things that stand you out as a storyteller? What are those things you need to do to be able to write a good story? Not just any good story, but a story people would buy. Something that can fetch you money, something that would allow you enjoy what you're doing while you earn from it. Okay, elements of a good story. Now, I'll start with the first one. For a good story, you need characters, yeah? And the first important person you need in that story is your main character. Literature will call that your protagonist. So you need the first person, the first element of a good story that would sell is your character. The number one character is what? Your protagonist, your main character. You need a good character for your main character, by the way. Okay, so who is the protagonist? The protagonist is your main character, the hero for male and or the heroine of your story. Okay, no story exists without characters. Whether you choose to use animals, those animals are still characters. If you choose to use tables and fans and what have you, you still have to put dialogue in those items. So your characters should be well selected, well planned out. And so your first character and foremost character should be the protagonist, the antagonist, sorry, the protagonist around whom the entire story is woven around. Okay, so the protagonist is the main character, the character that tells your story, not just him or her, but the main character that tells your story through your dialogue in his or her mouth. Okay, so what are those qualities we see in a protagonist and say, okay, this is a protagonist? What do we see in a character and say, okay, this is the protagonist of this story? First and foremost, your protagonist has to be likable. Likable. When you talk about likability, a character that we can see and just love, okay, but not a perfect character. Your protagonist should be likable, should be smart, should be intelligent, should be able to do stuff that would interest your audience. But now, while you're weaving that character shouldn't be perfect. He or she should have some flaws, but not flaws that would make him or her irritable or will make audience want to dislike that person. So your character should be a representation of life. No one single human being is perfect. So in trying to weave your your protagonist shouldn't be perfect. It should be likable, should be smart, should be intelligent beyond average, and should be likable, but not perfect. It should have what we call flaws. Flaws. And if it's going to be a tragedy, it should have tragic flaws. But I'm not going into that anyway. But all I know is it should have flaws. Flaws, when I mean flaws, I mean a little bit of weakness. Maybe he has a weakness of getting angry. Maybe the character has a weakness of sleeping too much. So, little things like that that could cause commotion here and there for the story, but not ultimately lead to the downfall of that character. So, the first and foremost element of a good story is having a good protagonist. A protagonist other audience members can be able to what relate to. That's the first person. Okay, so remember I said he should be interesting. He should be he or she, because it can be a female, it can be a male. So he or she should be interesting. He or she should be smart and intelligent beyond average. You don't have to get a below average person as your protagonist, except of course you're telling a comedy story. All right, that's one. Then the second is your antagonist. Now, if it is a short story, you necessarily do not need a villain or an antagonist. They're like synonyms. A villain is an antagonist is also a villain. So if it is a short story, you necessarily do not need to have an antagonist or a villain. Okay, it's not compulsory. But for a lengthy story, you need an antagonist. So for your storytelling, if you're writing a short book, like a collection of short stories, you necessarily do not have to need to get a villain. Your villain is optional, but your protagonist is not optional, please. Okay, so who is the villain or who is the antagonist? This is the major character that is always opposing the antagonist. Now let me use a case study of Chimamanda Adichie's um, Purple Hibiscus here. Let me use that Chimamanda Adichie's Purple Hibiscus, where you had Kambili, you had Papa, you had Jaja, you had Mama. If I don't know if you've read that, I don't know how many people have read Purple Hibiscus. I just want to assume everybody here is a bookish person like me. You read books a lot. If you want to be a storyteller, you also have to read a lot of books so that you're not lost as to how to weave your stories. So I'm assuming that some of us have read, but to throw away the assumption and be very sure, please, if you've read Purple Hibiscus, just say yes or no. If you've read Purple Hibiscus, please just indicate so that I don't use a story I'm not very sure of my audience knowing. If you've read that, please yes or no, or thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay, thank you. I see a yes. No. Okay, Francisca, you haven't. No. Lawrence, I see. Okay. Any other person? Storytelling themselves. Okay. No. So in the story, I think I'll just summarize it a bit since I have one person who has read it. Now, Chimamanda wove that story around religion, religious fanaticism, and Kambili's childhood to her teenage age. So here's a father who is a religious fanatic and also a strict father, a disciplinarian, and his children Kambili and Jaja, and then the wife Beatrice, who is also called Mama in the story. And so you see a father who has refused to bend his rules or who has refused to be flexible. He's a strict Catholic. And so he spanks his kids when they misbehave. He beats his wife when she misbehaves according to his own ideology. And so eventually he dies in the story. So you see that in that story, the major character who is the storyteller actually is Kambili. And then there is that antagonist, the father, who is always there to stand in the way of the progress of that child, of the entire family, and their growth as human beings and as Catholics with his fanatic ideas. Okay, so your villain or your antagonist should also be an interesting character. It shouldn't be a character that is all about being hated. Okay, nobody is so bad as almost going to be a devil or a demon. So if you're going to use a character, your character should also be such that in spite of all the bad qualities, in spite of the constant opposition of the antagonist, that protagonist still has some level of likability, but not as such as that of the protagonist. Okay, eventually you're meant to do what? Do justice to what he or she deserves at the end of your story. But it doesn't mean that your story should have that horrible person whom everybody hates. Even in real life situations, nobody has 100% demonic or devilish qualities. So if you watched, I don't know, if you watched Prison Break, you would see that this particular character, Theodore Bagwell, had a lot of issues. He was hated. He was almost like the antagonist, but he had something good about him. He was very smart, very, very smart. So your antagonist should as well be smart. There should be something likable about him. And so when you listen to Theodore Bagwell in that movie, you would see that even as the antagonist, he had a lot of things upstairs. He was very smart. He knew how to use words. He knew how to con his way out of situations. Okay, so your antagonist in opposing your major character shouldn't be entirely evil, shouldn't be entirely hated. There should be something good about him that characters can actually, sorry, the audience can actually say, oh, this person is actually good in this thing and all of that. But eventually, your antagonist should get what he or she deserves. Okay, and the next thing your storytelling needs is conflict. You need what? Conflict. And what is conflict? That's like the major issue in the story. Okay, you can't have a story that everything is just going all rosy. No, there has to be a conflict. It is the conflict that will further your story. If you want to write a story without conflict, you're going to end up with just one page. Okay, so every good story has a conflict. That conflict is where both the antagonist and the protagonist, they're all rallying around it, trying to resolve the issue. While the antagonist is opposing the protagonist is trying to conquer that conflict. So your story needs what? A good conflict. Okay. So what was the conflict in Chimamanda's Purple Hibiscus? The conflict was all about Papa's religious fanaticism, his inability to accept his father's traditional way of life, and then his pretense out there. He was a good person out there, but within his family, he was almost like a tyrant. Okay, so that was the conflict. He refused to let his children bloom and blossom. Okay, so that was the conflict. So your story needs a conflict. You cannot write a good story that would sell without conflict. For instance, look around you. You have a lot of situations in Nigeria. There is inflation, there is recession, there is corruption, and you want to write about Nigeria, and then you end up writing rosy stuff about Nigeria. Your story wouldn't sell. Okay, so you need to tell a story that people can relate to. You need to tell a story that that people cannot just relate to, but people can see a picture of it, that it is actually real life situation. So there should be a conflict where your characters can rally around and then eventually do what? Resolve that issue. So no story can actually be successful and sellable without good conflict. And so if you even want to write a novel, like a big novel with lots of pages, you need several conflicts. So the lengthier the story, the lengthier the conflict has to be. So you need more conflict if you're going to be able to do what? Write a huge novel. But if you want to write something little, so you just get one or two couple of conflicts and weave your story around it. It's a key factor in writing a good story that would sell. Okay, and please write believable conflicts. Don't come and write stories about things that are not relatable. How the devil came out of hell and came onto earth and things like that. No, conflict should be something your characters relate with. Your audience relates with. Your audience should be able to relate with inflation in the market. Your audience should be able to relate with gender issues in the country, and so on and so forth. So you need to be able to weave your story around a conflict your audience can be able to do what? Relate with. Okay. Another thing we need is suspense. Very important. You need suspense for a good story. Okay. You need suspense. So I don't know. I've read a lot of books, and I know that when I'm reading a book that has no suspense, it doesn't push me to want to finish reading the book. So every good story must have suspense. And how can you go about writing suspense? And what is suspense for those who do not know? Okay, suspense could be, let me explain it in layman's terms. At that point, when you're watching a movie or reading a book that you're on edge and you want to know what will happen next, that's what this point of suspense. You are agitated more of, you want to know what's going to happen next. You want to know if your antagonist is going to die or if your protagonist is going to die. There's suspense. You want to know what's going to happen next. Your story needs that element. Okay. If you want people to pick up your book and be enchanted and be captivated by your story, you need to be able to do what? To weave it around a conflict that would put people on edge. Okay, wanting to get to the end of your story. A lot of people pick up books, start from the first page, and then eventually they don't finish it and they dump it. That's not because they don't have the time to read it, it's because they lost interest. And why did they lose interest? Probably because there was no suspense, there was nothing captivating about that story. So your story needs conflict and it also needs suspense. Suspense will push me to read a book and finish it. Suspense would also push your audience to read a book and finish it to the last page. Okay. Then you need the resolution of your story, the resolution of the conflict within the story. You can't just weave a story around the conflict and then it ends. There is no resolution. The resolution is at the point where your story, your conflict is resolved. Now, when you're resolving conflict in a story, like I said in the beginning, it doesn't have to end happily. It doesn't have to do what? End happily. It can end on a sad note, yet the lesson is what learned. So you need your story to end well with your resolution. So let me use the same Kambili story again as a point of contact again, or as a point of reference rather. So Beatrice eventually kills her husband through poisoning, and then Papa dies, and then the son Jaja takes up responsibility for the death of the husband when the police come, and the mother was free. So Jaja goes to prison. Even though Papa dies, he wasn't supposed to die. Ordinarily, we would say, okay, why not Papa changing and moving around his strict rules? Why didn't he just change? Why didn't Chimamanda just make him change? But she didn't make him change. He died through poisoning from his wife, and then the wife still didn't do what? Go to jail. The son took it upon himself to take responsibility, and then he went to jail. So eventually, Jada went to prison, and then by the time towards the end of the story, he didn't even still come out of the prison. He remained in the prison, but there was hopes of him coming out of the prison. So you see that that character, even after suffering everything he had suffered, he's still in prison even when the story ends. But there's a resolution. At the time Papa dies, Chimamanda gave Kambili a voice, gave Beatrice a voice, gave Jaja a voice. They were able to stand tall and then oppose that Papa's fanatic tendencies. And then they were able to remain devout as Christians and still have a voice for themselves, which was the purpose for which Amanda gave Kambili that character. So they had a voice and still remain devout Christians and Catholics in that story. So your story can resolve itself, but it doesn't have to be positive all the time. It's real life. Sometimes you meet the bad, sometimes you meet the good. So, depending on how you want to weave your story, it can end on a happy note, it can end on an averagely good note, and so on and so forth. But just make sure you end your story well. Excuse me. So, if you're still with me, please give me an emoji. Are we following? Are we following? Please, I'd like to know. If I'm still fast, you tell me. If I need to repeat something, you tell me. I need to get okay, emojis. I get that. Maureen, Moy, okay. I can see that. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, still on the tips, or rather the elements of writing your story, then you also need to have a transformation for your character, especially your major character. Your major characters, by the way, should be round characters. In literature, we call round characters that change. There's transformation ongoing. Okay, your character shouldn't just start the way they started and end the way they started. For instance, you're seeing a movie, and somebody, maybe the major character, started out as poor, and then eventually the story ends with him becoming rich. That's a what? A round character. And then another example, the gate man in movies starts as a gate man and ends as a gate man. Nothing changes. That's because he's not a major character. So there should be a certain level of transformation in your major character. That's another element of good story writing that would sell. So you need you need to tell a story that transforms your major characters towards the end of your story. Kambili started out as a naive teenager who couldn't talk, who was shy. But towards the end of the story, Beatrice changes, Jaja changes, Kambili also changes. So your major character shouldn't be static, no change, no transformation. Your major character should have a certain level of transformation towards the end of the story. That way, your audience can read this story and say, oh, there is hope for this person. This eventually ended this way. Okay. So when you weave your story around a character and that character doesn't change, that character remains static, starts as one thing and ends at the same thing, that is not what a good characterization. So you need your characters, especially your major characters, to transform. They shouldn't be like Okon the gate man who doesn't change ever. I've never seen Okon changing in any movie, by the way. He remains the same person. Starts as a talkative gatesman illiterate and ends as a talkative illiterate gatesman. That shouldn't be your major character. There should be a transformation with your character. And then the last one, there should be a message. That's the most important one. There should be a message. There should be a takeaway. Your audience should have a takeaway from your story. What was it they got from your story? What was the intended message? When you started writing your story, what was the intended message? Do you want people to understand that gender equality is necessary? Do you want people to understand that religious fanaticism is bad? What exactly is your message? And were you able to pass across that message? If you are not able to pass across that message, it means your story on its own has failed. So please let that be a message, and the audience should be able to get that message and also relate with it. It should be relatable, very important, relatable. People do not relate to stories they don't know anything about. You can't tell me stories about Mars and Jupiter and I'll relate with it. So your story should be able to resonate with your audience. Okay. And that wraps it up for elements of good storytelling. So I'm going to give you some tips for writing good stories that would sell. I'm telling you firsthand because I've written stories. I know what people would want to read and what people would want to read. So the next thing I'm going to talk about are tips for writing a good story. I'm so sorry I didn't use the slide. I wasn't able to work my way around it, but hopefully the Thursday class I can do that. So the next thing we're going to talk about is tips for writing a good story that would sell. Tips for writing a good story that would sell. What do I need to do aside from the elements? It's not enough to know the elements. What are those tips I need to imbibe, put in my head while I'm writing a story? Okay. The first thing we can do when writing a story, the first tip you need to know is that first of all, you need to choose a story that is relevant. You need to choose a story that is what relevant to your target audience. You sit down in your room, you want to write a story. Who do you think would be your target audience? Teenagers, adults, religious people, church, or what? Who are those that you want to target as your audience when writing your story that you intend to market? You intend to fetch your money. Okay, so you have to first of all think and then ask yourself, who are those people I'm writing to or I'm writing for? So write a relevant story that would have a particular meaning or resonate with your audience. Okay, that's the first thing. If you're going to write a story, make sure your story is relatable and relevant. If you look around you in Nigeria right now, we have issues, we have relevant issues people need to write about. If you were in the time of Achebe, I'm sure you would have written something about the politics of today. So you can pick up a topic in the area of politics, you can pick up a topic in the area of gender inequality, you can pick up a story in the area of education and talk about it. So pick a story that is relevant to your target audience. Okay, that's the first one. Number two, make sure your story is meaningful. Meaningful. Don't just write stories that you just want to write because you've written 200 pages and you're happy that you've written a story. Is your story meaningful? Is your story meaningful? Are people gaining something from the story you've written? Okay, so write a story that is what meaningful. There is a lesson, there is a didactic to be gotten from it. In literature, what we call didactic is more like a moral lesson. Every story must not have a moral lesson per se, but it has to have meaning, something that your readers take away, something that your readers get hooked on and say, oh, I remember this story. This is what I got from this story. Okay. So there should be something you relate with. There should also be a meaning to be gotten from your story. The third thing you need to do is make sure there is enough conflict in your story, enough conflict to carry your story. You can't be writing, let's say, 200 pages of a particular story and you just have one tiny, weeny little conflict. The lengthier, I've said this before, the lengthier your story, the more conflict you need. Okay, so the only thing that can further your story, if you admire the likes of Chimamanda, the likes of Da Vinci, in what's it called, I've forgotten his name now, what's wrong with me, Da Vinci, the one who wrote Da Vinci, Dan Brown, then you need to be able to weave your story around conflicts, not just conflict but conflicts. Even when the first one is surmounted, you put up another conflict. Okay, so you need to make sure your story is meaningful, and then you need conflicts to further your story, except of course you are just writing an article or just a one-page story. But if you need to write lengthy stories like the likes of Chimamanda, then you need conflicts to further your story. Okay, and if you're just managing a website, for instance, let me deviate a little. If you're just managing a website or a social media handle, please, you don't need to be lengthy. Just stick to what your customers need to buy, and what your page is all about, and focus on it. You don't have to bother about the whole conflict thing, but just make sure that you are in line with what your customers want. Tell them stories, not abstract stories, but stories that relate to what you're selling, what you're offering, and the services you want to render to them. Okay. Then number four, there should be an arrangement for your story. Make sure your story has an arrangement. There's a cliched statement that if you plan, if you don't plan well, then you fail. So plan so that you don't fail. If not, you fail to plan. How am I saying it right? Okay. If you don't plan, then you plan to fail. Something like that. I know it's out of my head right now. But the idea is, make sure you plan your story. Don't just sit down and start writing. Okay. If you're going to build a house, you want to build a house, you don't just go to the market and begin to buy blocks, cement, and the rest of them. You need to be able to do what? Structure it, if not with an architect but with your engineer. So you need to do what? Have a structure. Do I want to build a duplex? Do I want to build a bungalow? And so on and so forth. It's the same thing with writing. What do you want to write? Structure it before even going into what? Writing a draft. Okay, so your story should have a structure. So that structure, you can start with the beginning, the middle, the end. What do you want at the beginning of your story? What do you want in the middle? What do you want at the end? And how do you want it to end? So when you have that structure, you can now begin to write, and it makes it easier. Okay, so don't just sit down. You don't have a story in your head yet, or you even have a story, but you don't even know how it ends. You just want to start writing, and then by God's grace, you end up writing towards the end. No, God is not going to give you grace to write something that you have not planned for. So you need to, first of all, write your story structure down. So when you structure it, you're already making what? Laying foundation and getting a picture of what you want your story to be like. You have a picture, you have it imagined in your head. That way, you don't even have writer's block. The only reason people have writer's block most times is mostly because they didn't plan the story, they don't have the end of the story in their head, and so they just get stuck in the middle. So if you have a structure, the structure allows you to write according to what you've written down. Just the way the architect's building, the architect's drawing helps the engineer to know at what stage he needs to do this and that. That's the same way your structure enables you to know, okay, what do I do next after this? Okay, so you need what? A structure, not just any structure, but you need a good structure. You should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you want to write an episodic plot, we have two kinds of plots for your story. You have your chronological plot, and then you have your episodic plot. Your chronological plot is the one that goes beginning of the story, middle, and then the end. You want to go with that structure, that's fine. Now, for seasoned writers, they have what we call the episodic plots. I don't know. I can explain it in layman's terms with movies again. If you watch movies, sometimes you see that the first scene, somebody has just died. You don't even know what happened to the person. That's like an episodic plot. You start from the middle or towards the end of the story, and then work your way towards the beginning again. Now, for people who are still trying to start writing the books, you don't need to go through the episodic plots route. You need to go through the chronological process. By the time you get conversant with all of this writing, then you begin to start, you begin to do the episodic plot if you so wish. But it's easier to do the chronological plot than the episodic plot. Okay, so Let your story have what? A structure. Have a structure before you venture into drafting your story and then eventually writing the main copy. Okay. Then the next one, instead of what's it called? Instead of writing lots of drafts, this is also like the other point I just made. Instead of writing lots and lots of drafts, have a structure. The structure will stop you from having a lot of drafts thrown into the trash, trying again, throwing into the trash. If you have a structure, you can avoid the whole trash thing. Okay. Then again, start your book with a great hook. Start your book with a great hook. Now, if you pick a book and you read the first couple of pages and you are not hooked, you are bound not to read that other story again, except you're trying to do the author a favor to finish it. So if you want to write a book that would sell, your beginning should be what? A story should be a hook. There should be a hook. Your beginning should do what? Hook your readers. Okay. Write a beginning that would hook your readers. I want to be able to pick a book, read the first couple of pages, and I'll be wowed. Then I can continue. Okay. So write an intro that is what's going to hook your readers. Don't just go about writing and then you say, oh, towards the ending, the movie will be, the book will be interesting. No, your story should be interesting from day one, page one. Okay. Nobody has the luxury of time to go towards the end of your story to see if it's going to be interesting or not. We want to see from the first page that the book is actually an interesting one, that the story is something that we can actually continue reading towards the end and then be satisfied at the end of reading it. So write your book with a great hook towards the beginning. Then again, don't give away your ending. If you give away your ending, people will not even read towards the end again. So it's important that you read, you first of all, you start with a good hook, and then your ending should also not be given away. Okay. These days, when you watch Nollywood movies. Sorry, I'm always going back to movies. Script writing is a form of story writing, so they are related. You cannot get movies without stories, so you need script writing, which are stories too, for movies. So sometimes you watch Nigerian movies, not just sometimes, most times, and you already know what's going to happen towards the end. That's because you've written a mediocre story that lots of people have written. You've written something cliched. Okay, you write the standard script is girl meets boy, for instance, boy marries girl, and that's the end. Or poor boy becoming a rich man eventually. So these are standard plots that everybody is already aware of. We're tired of it. So why not write a story that would hook people and then make people read towards the end? Okay, if you're able to do that, then people can pick up your books and be hooked. They will sit down, filled with suspense, and read your book to the finish. Okay, and the person can also read and recommend to another person, because you can't cover the entire world. It's recommendation of people that would enable you to do what makes sales. So if I pick a book and I read and it's interesting, I can tell my friend, oh, that particular book is interesting, pick it up and buy. Okay, so people can buy your books based on recommendation. And if the first person who picked your book is not able to enjoy it, trust me, the person is not going to tell another person to buy your book. So if you want to write stories that would sell, make sure you hook your readers from page one. Hook your readers from page one. Make sure of that. And then do not give away your ending. Let it not be something that can be assumed or guessed easily. Okay. That brings us to the point of conflict. Your conflict is something that people cannot easily say, oh, how is this thing going to end? How is it going to turn out? So please, your beginning should be a good hook, and then do not release your what's it called now? Do not let it out easily, maybe through your characters and the rest of them. Make sure that your ending remains the ending. It shouldn't be known towards the beginning, and then we are now left with lots of pages not read. Okay, people want to get value for their money. People don't want to buy books and dump. They want to get value for their money. And if you want to make sales, then you need to give them value for their money through the content of your writing. Okay, Another thing is for you to read books, read books. You cannot get ideas for what you want to write. There at at some point you're going to get stuck. Please, you need to read books, read a lot of books, read books. Storytellers are book readers. Storytellers see story in everything. So if you read books, you are able to see story in everything. Even the little ants, the little cockroach in your room can give you a full-blown story. So please read books. This can help you with your stories, even when you have writer's block. It's just be temporarily and temporary, and you move on with your storytelling. And then the last thing you need to do is your book should have error-free grammar. Error-free grammar. Please, you can't be a storyteller and then you are rushing to publish and eventually you publish something that is filled up with errors. Nobody wants to read that because it is assumed that as a storyteller, as an author, you are a wordsmith. Okay, you're a wordsmith. Nobody wants to read bad English. Nobody wants to read errors. Nobody wants to pick up a book and then see errors. I personally, for one, I do not read books that have errors. Okay, so make sure that your storytelling or story writing rather has error free content, please. If you're not good with editing, there are people out there you can give to read your book and edit for you. Okay, even if it means paying them or even if it means meeting friends whom you know they speak well and they read well, you give it to them to read. So sometimes we write and then we feel, oh, this is perfect, and somebody else says no, it's not perfect. Sometimes we also do our work and we feel it's not good enough, and somebody else says it's good. So you need a second reading, a third reading from different people. You need different opinions. So don't be in a hurry to publish. Please, once you're done writing, read it yourself again and then give it to someone else to read. Editors, proofreaders, and so on and so forth. They can do that for you. Don't be in a hurry to sell your book. Don't be in a hurry to go to the church, especially to distribute your books to church members. There's Amazon and the rest of them. Do not sell yourself short and cheap. Okay. If you know what you're doing, then you need to do it well. Whatever is worth doing well at all. Okay. So when you have your book ready, give it to people to edit for you and then get a second, third, even fourth opinion before you publish it. And when you're publishing, your book has to have a good cover. Okay, it has to have a good cover. Don't pick something that it looks like it was done in Onisha, my place. Okay, so you need to be able to pick up books and then you look at the book, the content is beautiful. First of all, the cover page is beautiful, and then when you begin to read, the font and everything is beautiful. So you need your stories to sell through your books. You can't just write a fantastic story and then expect people to just pick it up. From the book cover to your content, to your story, to your font, everything is very, very key to making money out of your books. Okay, so I've been droning on for some time now. Please, if you're still with me, raise your hands up. I'm about rounding up, please. I'm about rounding up. If you're with me, please, thumbs up or something indicate. I hope everybody is still here with me. If you're still with me, please, I need to see indications of that. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So to summarize everything I've said so far, yeah, from discovering that stories are important, stories are everyday reality, to the point where I talked about the tips for writing a good story and also making money out of your sales. To summarize, the first thing is you can use your stories to capture or engage your audience. Okay, you can use your stories to capture your audience. All right, very important. Don't undermine the importance or the quality of your story. You can write a good story and feel bad about it and then give it to another person and the person tells you it's awesome. So you need to be able to do what? Read your stories, write your stories and also put them out there boldly as long as you're sure of what you have done. So the first thing is your stories can capture your audience, except of course you've not gone through the processes you need to go through. Stories are powerful. Stories um are powerful enough for you to catch your audience, for you to make people do what they didn't even intend to do, though not negative. Okay, so story can be used to capture and engage people. Then again, make sure your stories are relevant. Make sure, I can't stop saying that, I can't say that enough. Make sure your stories are relevant and meaningful enough for your audience to pick something out of. Okay, it should resonate with your audience. You cannot be writing to teenagers and then what you're talking to them about is something for old people. Okay, whatever you're writing, it should be able to what resonate with your target audience. It's very key. Another thing is your main character, your conflict, your antagonist should be woven beautifully. Your major character, that is the protagonist, shouldn't be a perfect creature, okay? Shouldn't be a perfect human. It should be a character with some form of flaws, okay? Even while being relatable with him by the audience, okay? Then your antagonist shouldn't be so evil as well. There should be something good about your character, okay? And then your conflict, very key that you have conflict in your story, and the lengthier your story, the lengthier your conflict, okay? It's very important that you weave your conflict around believable stories. Don't tell people about demons coming in from Hades and all of that. Let your story be believable. Let your conflict as well be believable, okay? Another thing I said is struggle. Whatever struggle you're creating for your audience through your story should be something that will eventually be resolved. There should be a resolution. Don't end your story halfway and leave your audience hanging. Let there be what? A resolution to your story. There should be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then towards your climax, that's the part where you are filled with suspense. There should be a resolution. Don't leave your characters, sorry, your audience hanging. Your story should end well, whether positively or negatively. We have to learn a lesson from it. So if your characters are going to die, for instance, there should be a lesson learned from the dying. It's going to end happily. There should be a lesson learned from the happy ending as well. So it is not necessarily going to end happily, but it should end with a lesson, with a take home for your audience. And then, like I said, as long as you are alive, as long as I am alive, you have a story, I have a story. There is nothing such as I don't have a story to tell. Every day, for the last 2 months, I've been on a challenge, okay? And that challenge is to write one thing every day. And I tell you, I've been able to do that for the last 2 months. So it's a matter of convincing yourself that you can do it. It's not about not having what to write. It's about focusing on doing it and doing it right. Okay. So if you give yourself a challenge, you can actually see it through. So there is a story in you, there's a story in me, there's a story in your colleague at work. You can get these stories from within you and from without you as well, and use them to your benefit to make lots and lots of money. Okay. And so to end, I hope everybody is following me. To end, I'm just going to say that story is our way of life. We use stories in businesses, we use story in the church, we use story basically everywhere. And so if you're going to write a story, and if you're going to tell a story, let it be a story that you are going to be proud to sell out there. Okay. Don't write to dump in your box. Don't write to dump in your bag. Write for the purpose of meeting a target audience and earning money from what you enjoy doing. Okay. And so if you feel like it's a difficult task, you don't have to be like Chimamanda in one day. Start somewhere. Don't keep procrastinating. You can start today, you can start tomorrow. Okay, just start with something. You can start with writing about your day tomorrow. Find something, an activity that happened in your day, and write about tomorrow. Maybe that should be a challenge for us tomorrow. You write something about your day tomorrow. A particular activity can stand out for you tomorrow, and you write about it. When you do that continuously, trust me, you're going to see yourself writing good stories. Thank you. I think that does it. If you have questions, please, you can tell me, but I'm done. All right. Maureen, I'm done. Anybody who has questions can ask me questions. I can see you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you so very much for this wonderful and insightful session. I want to sincerely appreciate you. We pray the Lord God enriches you
Amen.
abundantly, even as
Amen.
He causes His light to shine upon you and help you to broaden your horizons beyond your expectation. I want to use
Amen.
this
Thank you.
medium while we await for questions. It's time for questions and answers. But while we wait for the questions to drop, would like to quickly plead with each and every one of us. It's a plea from the depth of my heart that I have. Please, if you have friends that are meant to be part of this session that are not here at the moment, please kindly let them know that they should try as much as possible to avail themselves for the session. I don't know how we use opportunities that we get. Some of us, everyone paid for this session. We paid for the classes, and then there are some persons that are not coming up. So please, if you have friends, just send them messages and let them know we're already on and we're already on day 5. Let them not just miss it out. We want the class to be as interactive as much as possible. So while the facilitator is on, from time to time, you can as well just respond to let the facilitator know that you are actually following. And lastly, I'm going to talk about tomorrow's session. Any question? I'm not seeing any question drop in. Are we still there? We
Thank
should keep
you,
a date
Francisca.
for another interesting edition of our Writers Summit. We shall be looking at poetry made easy for those of us that are lovers of poetry. Tomorrow shall be another interesting package. So let's keep a date and be punctual, please. Questions? We're still waiting for the questions. Is it my
Okay.
connection?
I
I'm
can
not
see one
seeing.
question here. I think I can see a question here. What is the place of journal keeping in storytelling? Okay. What is the place of journal keeping in storytelling? Okay. I hope can we hear me? I hope everybody can hear me. Okay.
Yes,
So
I can hear you.
all
Go
right.
on.
So journals are like your daily entries into a particular book for the purpose of recording what you wish to record for the day based on your experiences for the day. Now, I know a lecturer of mine while I was in university who turned a journal into a story, and she made a lot of money out of that particular story. So journal keeping helps you sort of, if you feel you can't write fiction, I know it's difficult to write fiction, something that you haven't lived yourself, you're trying to weave a story out of your imagination based on maybe other people's experiences and what you have seen happening around you. Journal keeping can help you write. How does it do that? It helps you do that by way of the fact that you write every day. You're able to tell a story based on your morning till evening schedule for the day. And so eventually you find yourself writing pages and pages of books based on your own personal experience. So I feel journal keeping helps you in storytelling. As you're telling a story of your own self, you begin to add other people. Your story is not just about you, because eventually you're going to meet people at work, people at school. And so those people are going to occur as well. They're going to have their own space in your story. So, journal keeping, I encourage a lot of people to write journals when they are not able to write stories. It can be a starting point for you towards writing your story. From journal keeping, you eventually begin to write novels, because ordinarily you've seen that I'm able to do this for a whole year, for instance, and I have about 365 pages of entries done already. So if you can do that, then you can easily do novels for other people as well. Thank you. I hope I answered your question. Okay.
You sure did. Great job, Matter. Well done for the great job you just did.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Any more questions? Like I said in my plea, please and please, if you have friends that are meant to be, Francisca Amayo says, thank you so much for an inspiring presentation.
Okay. Thank
Please
you
and please, if
too.
you have friends that are meant to be part of the sessions, please remind them that we've already started. Otherwise, we're going to plead with the academy to add up another course to it, something like her nursing opportunity, because it seems we don't even know our orientations. Sorry to say, it seems our orientation is very bad. We don't know how to harness opportunities that we get. There are so many persons that want to explore, that want to become great writers, but here we are, we have the opportunity. Some of us, we enrolled for this course by ourselves, make the payment, and I don't know why we are wasting the resources. If you don't want to do it, you could ask someone else to take your place instead of just letting me go like that. Please, let's try. No more questions? In
Yeah.
the absence of any questions, we are going to be drawing the curtains right now. It's going to be a good night from our own end. Thank you so very much, everyone, for being with us and even being patient with us when we had
Thank
network
you.
challenges. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.